Hello and welcome back. Today, I am going to tell you about a writing exercise that changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I know that sounds mad corny. I know it sounds cringe, but I'm telling you the truth. Back in 2015, I had a very uninspiring office job. I worked for a company that handled workers' compensation injury claims, and I loved my team. Like, I loved my bosses. I loved the culture of the company, but what I actually did for work, I did not really love. Like, I wasn't very passionate about it. I poured as much of myself into it as I could. I did as good of a job as I could, but it just was not really inspiring to me. It wasn't anything that really motivated me personally. So I came across, I think, this blog post that had a writing exercise on it. And I made it my own. I think the original exercise, I want to credit the right person. I believe the author's name is Victor Pride. The writing exercise was to go to a very quiet place alone without any of the electronic noise that we're used to. And 10 years ago, it was less than we have now. But like, turn your cell phone off, get away from screens, get away from TV, get away from family, go to a quiet place alone. And nature is a bonus, but somewhere alone with a pen and a paper. And on that first sheet of paper, you're supposed to write down everything that matters to you, the things that matter the most to you, the things that you value the most. And this was meant to be a list to help you focus in on what is important in life, focus in on what you really care about. This list might be different for every person, but the things that don't belong on the list are like the things that your family tell you are important, right? Because sometimes what our family says is important and what is actually important to us, they don't really match. The things that your friend group thinks is important, you don't have to write that down. It's really about how you feel and what you deem most important in life. The things that culture, that your state, your city, your state, your ethnicity, your political affiliation, your country tells you are important, they don't go on this list. This list is just about what you feel is the most important to you. It's supposed to be about you. And you go over this list and you refine it. Like, every time you go over it, you're supposed to try to narrow it down little by little until you have, maybe you started with a list of 20 things. By the end of this exercise, you're supposed to have maybe 5 or 6 of the things that are the most important. Like, if you couldn't have anything else, if you couldn't achieve anything else, if you couldn't accomplish anything else, if you couldn't be anything else, what is the most important to you, right? And the second part of this exercise is to write what you want out of life, right? Wow, this is rocket science. I know it sounds very simple, but when I went to do this exercise, what I valued was important. What I valued as important was a bit easier to write. But to write down what I actually wanted out of life, that's where I hit difficulty. That's where I started to feel silly. That's where I started to feel greedy for literally identifying what I wanted out of life. That's when I started to feel ridiculous, like almost like I didn't have the right to say how I wanted my own life to turn out. But I sat there. I went into an empty conference room. I sat at the table in silence. I took maybe like a 30-minute break to do this on just the legal pad that was in my office. And I wrote down what was most important to me. And I wrote down like what I want out of life. If there are no barriers, right? The point of writing this is there's no one there to tell you that it cannot be done. There's no one there to tell you you're thinking too big or you're thinking too small. There's no one there to tell you that you can't do it. You want to be alone for that purpose, and you're not supposed to share this necessarily with everyone or even with anyone if you don't want to. but you do want to write down this list. And the things that I wrote down on my list, I have a clip of one of the screenshots I took. Like, I took a picture and then that picture became like a screenshot in an old blog that I had. One of the things I wanted to do more was to write what I felt, what I went through, what my life was like, what I experienced, what I came to know as truth. And I started to do that a little bit at the time. I started a blog the same year that I did this exercise. I started that towards the end of the year. Another one of my goals that seemed very far-fetched at the time was to utilize my gifts and talents and to gain additional knowledge to help people heal, to use, nutrition, to use therapy modalities, to use neuroscience and biology and all of these things together to be in a position to help people heal from wounds, and especially to help women reach their highest level of functioning. That sounded very far-fetched at the time. Like, I'm literally jotting this down in an office for a job that I don't really love. And I haven't even gotten my first bachelor's yet. I haven't even earned a degree yet at this point. I'm a college dropout, that ran to Texas to cosplay as a hippie and ended up in a very straight-laced job, by the way. But I wrote down everything that was in my heart that I wanted to do. I wrote down what I wanted out of life. I want to be able to help women and girls heal from trauma. I want to be able to write about my experiences in my life more eloquently. I want to be able to share openly and not feel, shame or guilt, or, as y'all would say now, cringe, by doing that. I really poured out a lot into this exercise, and it did not happen overnight. All of these things did not happen overnight, but writing it and just, as they say, write the vision and make it plain. Writing it and thinking about it and forcing my mind to cough out and refine goals, dreams, hopes, cares, just everything that I dare to dream about, that I dare to hope for, that I dare to envision for myself. It did slowly change the trajectory of my life. After doing this exercise, these are the small ways in which the trajectory of my life began to change. I started to blog at the end of that year. I had moved back home from Texas to be closer to family because my father was dying of cancer at that time. Thankfully, he had more years in him, but I wrote about those experiences. I re-enrolled back in the university that I dropped out of to move to Texas in the first place. I re-enrolled as a psychology major. And to make sure that I was in the right field, I began an internship as a PRP counselor, that Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center, or Psychiatric Rehabilitation Program counselor. So I started to do work like that. I started to have real caseloads of the whole lifespan, pediatric clients and adult clients that were as old as 60 and as young as I think 8 or 9 was my youngest client. I had individuals, I had an entire family unit. I would go to see them in the community wherever they lived, whether that be a home, an apartment, a condo, a shelter at the time, what we would refer to as a halfway house or like a rehabilitative house, or out in the community. I would go see them. Sometimes they would book appointments with me and come into the office and see me. I would check on them. I would help them work towards discrete goals that seemed small, right? But that built towards the bigger goals of mental stability and good mental health and resilience and, accomplishing goals like acquiring education, finishing their GEDs, turning grades around if they were still in elementary or middle or high school. I would have never went into that work. I promise you, I wouldn't have felt confident enough to really go for that. If I didn't identify that as such a big goal to me, if I didn't sit there and write, I want to work in mental health. I've dreamed of working in mental health. I've already had experiences that let me know that this is where I should be. That is part of the reason it primed my mind to say, this is a goal and you have an opportunity. Like, just go for it. I was afraid to apply because I'm like, I'm still a student. Even though I'm an older student, I'm still a student. I don't even know if I qualify for this. I interviewed for it. I got it right away and I loved it. It was an incredible opportunity and it really finally honed me in on mental health. That psych degree, it would take me a few years to finish that. It's embarrassing to say, but it would. But it was incredible education along the way. It really confirmed mental health is where it's at for me. And I had like real experiences under my belt, a real caseload, real clients to really confirm all of that. Other ways that this aligned me with my purpose was making me more open to entrepreneurship. You know, I had helped someone very close to me begin an assisted living facility, and I was in a support role for them. I had previously, before that, had other experiences in like rehab centers, like as a CNA, as a certified nursing assistant, and rehab centers and nursing homes. And for real, I wasn't feeling none of it. I wasn't feeling any of it. But it's so easy to critique from a limited view when you don't know what types of information goes into the decision making at a higher level. So being able to be more hands-on with helping that close person start their own business, I'm like, oh, okay, I see some of the decisions. I see how other people can justify it. I don't agree with it, but I understand that it's more complex than I could see from my vantage point. So from that helped me to realize, like, not only can this be done, but I feel like I can do it better than what I have seen in the past, right? And so that opened up a whole new like area of life. And things kind of fell together when I met my husband, when we were engaged. I had an opportunity for us to essentially start our own. Now, in the beginning, because we were engaged and not married, it was for me to start my own, but he was willing to pour into me and to be a positive, you know, person to encourage me and to have skin in the game, even when we were just engaged. So that became our business. We became married and then started that together. He did a lot of the prep work as unpaid free labor in the beginning. I'm not going to lie, he did a lot of help. But that opens up a whole nother avenue. By starting that and taking this other risk and creating a facility that focused on mental health as opposed to physical disabilities, because that was my area of interest, that eventually helped me to leave another uninspiring office job doing bodily injury claims. So that was a very, you know, for me, I'm a very basic plain type of girly. For me, that was a well-paying job because I still did not have my bachelor's at that point. And I lived, you know, well within my means. And that job was pretty, like, I was taken care of with that job. I was good with that job. But I recognized I can do something different. And I did have to juggle both in the beginning because it was my primary income source. And I didn't want to take the plunge into full entrepreneurship with no cushion, right? So we saved, we scrimped and everything. But eventually I had the freedom to leave that job. Being a leader and trying to make the world a better place, that was something that was from that original list in 2015. The time the business started, the planning stages was 2018. The execution was 2019. You know, the licensing, all that stuff came 2019. But the planning stages was really me thinking at that fork in the road when the opportunity presented itself and taking a risk. Because that's something that I knew was important to me. That's something that I mulled over when I made that list. And I looked back on that list pretty freaking often throughout the years, right? That opened up new opportunities of doing consulting in that field. Once I licensed and operated 2 homes and helped a friend, another friend, a third friend open up theirs, I said, hey, I can't tell you how to handle everything perfectly, but I can tell you how to get licensed. I can tell you how to pass inspection. I can tell you how to find stable staff. And I can tell you that it's important to pick your population. So that opened up the door of consulting for me and my husband both, which was awesome. From working in that space and working with my delegating nurse on a regular basis, I was like, I want to be more hands-on. And so now I have a few experiences under my belt where I have tried different things and I'm getting good results, right? I'm getting good results. I'm working and I'm achieving, like a little bit by little bit. My life is starting to look more inspirational to me. It's starting to look more in alignment with the things that I identified as important in 2015, the things that I identified as goals, as my vision, as what I wanted to get out of life, right? So I got the idea in my head, and from prayer, okay, girl, you went back to school for nursing. That meant I had to finish this lingering psychology degree. So I finished it, and I finished it begrudgingly, okay? Because I started going back in like 2015. I ain't finished that daggone degree until January 2021, all right? But I had to in order to get into an accelerated nursing program. So I finished that degree. I started taking my prereqs. As I'm taking my prereqs, I'm learning a little bit more neuroscience. I'm learning the anatomy and physiology of it all. I'm learning the physiological side of mental health as I'm taking these prereqs. I'm learning the chemistry of it all as I'm taking these prereqs. It's like opening my mind. And then I applied to nursing schools. My first round of applications, I applied to like the direct entry programs. If you don't know, they're very, they are despised by some and beloved by others. They're very controversial. Well, listen, God will have it. I did not get into any of those programs. My first year of applications, didn't get anywhere. I got waitlisted one place and I was 2 spots away from getting into the place I wanted to go. I said, dang, okay. Maybe I should just do an accelerated program and not a direct entry where everything is pushed together. I knew I wanted to do Psych NP. For me, under my belt, by the time I was applying to nursing school, I had years of successful business ownership that involved collaborating with providers at multiple levels, collaborating with an entire healthcare team to ensure positive outcomes for patients that I was personally responsible and liable for, that I cared for very deeply. I had experience in the counseling field with an active caseload of patients from, or you would say clients in that situation, of clients from like age 7 to age 60s. So it wasn't like,
oh, I just want to be a Psych NP because it's cute and because they make a lot of money and because like,
no, this was my passion. I had identified mental health as my passion before I even applied to nursing school, and I did work in the field and I created a business in the field to serve other people because that was what was on my list, right? That was what was on my list. Now you're seeing the power of this list, right? So I said, all right, direct entry, that might be a little too much. I can't just run it all through. Let me go to an accelerated nursing, an accelerated BSN program, and then we'll see what happens after that. So I do my second round of applications, bam. I get into the first school I applied to, I get into the second school I applied to, and after that, I'm like, I ain't doing nothing else. I already know where I want to go. I started to build a confidence at this point. Like, if it's aligned with what God has for me, and if it's aligned with even the desires of my heart that God has confirmed, hey, this is for you. God said, hey, Psych NP. I started getting the signs before I even began applying that was the right path, right? Stuff is starting to happen now. It's starting to snowball. it's starting to snowball. Small in the beginning, just as small as starting a blog. And that's where my writing took me, right? That was like the creative writing. That was the encouraging writing. Then it went into applying for this internship. It went into applying back to finish the first bachelor's, which was psychology. Now it's carried me into nursing school. And I love my psych rotation. It's incredible. I pretty much love all my rotations. My teachers are amazing. I'm seeing how they utilize their nursing degrees and how they went ahead and have achieved so much. It's a very inspirational atmosphere, and I can't believe I'm crushing it. This program is hard. But again, I love to learn. That's on my list. I want to be constantly learning. That's a life goal for me. I don't want to be stagnant. I want to be constantly learning. I want to be a lifelong learner. So I'm in this accelerated program. The first summer semester of like 12 weeks is like 20 something credits. It's crushing me, but I'm crushing it back. I'm crushing it back, y'all. I'm loving it. I'm soaking in everything that I can. I'm so ready to learn. And because of the previous decisions, I don't have to work during nursing school. I can really focus on nursing school. I haven't had a traditional 9 to 5, haven't needed one since beginning that business and really getting it stable. So, you know, even though we shifted away from active operation of the assisted living facility, it still was paying dividends. That risk was paying dividends years forward, right? I graduate school, and lo and behold, I have an opportunity to continue my education. For what? I mean, hear you say it. For what? For Psych NP, of course. And it's miraculous. It's a miraculous situation, right? But it happens organically. And I thank God for it. We praise the Lord for when those things align in that way. And now, as I'm in the Psych NP, I'm in advanced pharmacology. And what am I learning? I'm learning the neuroscience of it all. I'm learning the mechanism of action for a whole slew of drugs, for many different categories of medications, but especially for mental health. I'm learning on a molecular level what these medications are doing. I'm learning the limitations of how much we understand what these medications are doing, especially in psych, right? So I'm getting not only a sense of taking in the knowledge, but being able to assess, like, there is so much that we don't know yet. There is so much that we don't know yet, and having a respect for that. And having different case studies in my psych graduate courses of assessing and using the DSM-5 and looking at all the criteria and connecting the dots with patients and what they're saying and what they're experiencing and what their, childhood was like, looking out for prodromal symptoms and all of this. I'm learning it on a deeper level, and I'm loving every moment of it. All of this is a long-winded way of saying that little writing experiment, that little writing exercise that I did almost became like a subconscious North Star for me. By sitting down in peace and quiet and silencing all the critical voices in my head and from within myself and from the outside world, and really taking the time to think about what mattered to me and what I wanted to get out of life and what I wanted to give from my life, what I wanted my legacy to be. Should I pass away tomorrow? Should I pass away 10 years from now, 40 years from now, 100 years from now? Giving that some critical thought and allowing the answer to come from within me and not from society and not from anything in this world, not from my country, not from my culture, but from within me, right? That really slowly but surely changed the trajectory of my life. I recognize that we see things as rigged and we see barriers as being concrete and permanent that are not. I had a friend back in Austin who I love dearly, who, I talked to them about the importance of positive thinking. And he, kind of challenged me on that a little bit and was like, positive, I get it, but intentional is where it's at, right? And we talked about when you're riding a bike, wherever you are looking is where that bike tends to drift, whether you mean to or not, right? If you look in a certain direction for long enough without even actively noticing it, those handlebars, you're going to kind of drift in the direction that you're looking. If you're looking into nothingness and you're just dazed and going through life like it's a daydream, that may be where your life heads, right? If you can identify a certain point to focus on that is meaningful to you, or a few points to focus on, I want to have a healthy relationship that has groundwork of respect mutually, and love and safety and excitement and growth. If you identify that that is important to you and you work your end of the spectrum to be that healthy person that can attract and retain that type of relationship, that is where your dating is going to drift. When you set that as an objective and you write it down and you look at that objective from season to season or from year to year, that's going to subconsciously have you go in that direction. When you encounter behavior that's disrespectful, you might be like, well, yeah, this isn't going to fulfill that part of me that's yearning for that. Even just writing it down forces you to be honest with yourself. Like if you are, I'll say for myself, having kids was not on that list for me personally. That doesn't mean that I would be distraught if it happened now. I'm happily married, 7 years. But at that time it wasn't important. And guess what? That didn't drive any of my decisions up until this point. It didn't drive it because it wasn't important. Just being honest with yourself about what do you actually want? What do you actually want to achieve, to give? Who do you want to be? It takes a level of vulnerability because many of us have been told you can't do it. You're not smart enough for that. Or many of us are surrounded by critical voices that will shoot down ideas, that will shoot down our own honesty with ourselves, that will say, oh, that's cringe. Oh, maybe your goals are different than mine. Maybe it has nothing to do with neuroscience and mental health and being a lifelong learner. Maybe that's not up your alley. But what is? If there were no barriers, if there was no glass ceiling, what would you go for? What would you try to do? Who would you want to be? I encourage you to identify that today. I encourage you to go somewhere quiet, just you and your thoughts, to write down 2 things. Number 1, what is most important to you? What do you value most in yourself and others in this life? And the second thing is, what do you want? What do you want out of this life? No one's going to tell you no. I'm going to cheer you on. I'm going to cheer you on, honestly. Because you have something inside of you that is meant to be shared that we all need, right? And we're not going to uncover that as you run with the rest of the pack. We're not going to uncover that as you blend in with everybody else. But the first steps is to try that exercise. That's it. I think that's all I have to say right now. I think that's it. All right. Go do it. Tell me what's on your list if you want. Send this to somebody else who needs to dream bigger. It works. It works. It works. All right. Love you guys. Bye.